Welcome everybody to the 2022 Young Women's Leadership Conference. We're so excited to have you all here today. My name is Erica Maldonado Singh. I'm the Assistant Director at the Center for the Political Future. And after a 2-year hiatus, we are so happy to be back on campus. Last year, we celebrated our 10th annual Leadership Conference virtually. I'm curious, did anybody attend our virtual conference last year? Oh my gosh, we have a few. Well, welcome to USC. Has anybody never been to campus before? Show of hands. A few. Love it. Okay, well, welcome. Welcome to your future school. Well, happy Women's History Month. There's no better way I think we could have kicked off this month than with all of you today. So from the bottom of my heart and from the bottom of our entire team, we just want to thank you all for being here today and spending your Saturday with us. We have a lot of fun planned for you. It's pretty much there, straightforward, so I'm not going to go into detail fully of our agenda, but what I can tell you is we have amazing, inspirational women here to share their stories, to motivate you, to inspire you from college age to middle age. They've lived through it, they've done the work, and they're here to share all they've learned with all of you.
I'm the Programs Associate here at the Center for the Political Future, and I'm also a senior at USC, and I study International Relations and Econ, and I have a minor in Comparative Literature. So for this panel, I'll give a little spiel about each of our guests, and then we'll have a moderated conversation, and then afterwards you all will have a chance to ask any questions you might have to our panelists. And we have a really great bunch of people here today. I'm so excited to hear from them, and I hope that you all will learn a lot today too. So our first guest is Ashley Fumiko Dominguez. Ashley is the Associate Director of Federal Relations at UCLA, where she leverages her expertise in immigration, education, national security, international affairs, and government to assist the university in building a strong relationship with the federal government. She previously served in the district office of Congressman Ted Lieu, Representative Nancy Pelosi, and Senator Dianne Feinstein. Next, we have Noelia Rodriguez. She is the Chief of Staff of Metrolink, where she serves as the top advisor to the CEO. She's had an incredible career serving as Communications Director for First Lady Laura Bush, Deputy Mayor for LA Mayor Richard Riordan, and President and CEO of LA 2000, the host committee for the 2000 Democratic National Convention in LA. And she served as the Vice President of Corporate Communications at Univision. Next, we have Helen Alonso Hurtado. Helen is a social enterprise manager at Las Fotos Project, where she combines her personal passion for youth development with her professional passion of building financially sustainable nonprofit organizations. She's also responsible for the creative direction and manages all aspects of her organization's activities, including its CEO program, which connects students to paid job opportunities and prepares them for careers in the creative industry. And she's also a Trojan alum. Fight on. And then we have Natalie Bui. She's the co-founder of Shift Consulting. She's worked on voter education at Planned Parenthood, immigrant rights at the ACLU of San Diego, and policy advocacy at Asian Americans Advancing Justice. She's also an illustrator and cares deeply about centering the narratives, identities, and politics of communities of color. So a lot of different areas within politics, so we're gonna have an interesting conversation. So first I'd like to start, this is for all of you, and we also have one mic, so we'll pass it down. If you guys could each talk about, as briefly as you can, what you do in your job and your career journey. So we'll start with you.
Hi everyone, don't hold it against me that I'm from UCLA, really. I know we're at USC and I got clearance from my boss to be here, I promise. So very nice to be here with you, super excited to see all your faces. And I guess the first part of the question is, my job is to manage UCLA's relationship with the federal government. I spent a long time working for various members of Congress, and really I try to make their job easier by helping UCLA, and I try to make UCLA's job easier by helping them. So, whether it's UCLA needing additional funding for financial aid, like right now we're trying to double the Pell Grant, which would impact, I think, probably a lot of you, definitely impacted me when I was a student, or working on immigration issues, that I'm always working with our legislators to improve that. Very quickly, how I got here is I'm a first-gen student. I went to a CSU in San Francisco, stayed there for grad school, and I just felt a very strong call to public service. And my then mentor made a joke and said, "You're like an actress that won't move to Hollywood. How are you ever going to get an acting job? If you want to work for government, you got to go to DC." And so I started my career as an unpaid intern for the speaker, because I'm from San Francisco, and I really just worked my way up from there. And a few years ago, UCLA poached me, and that's how I got to where I'm at now. Super excited to be here and to speak with all of you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm really thrilled to be with you all today. I want to point out something that Maria said a few minutes ago, and I kind of chuckled when she said it. Two things, actually. One is, I love her story that she knew she wanted to come to USC, but didn't get in the first time around. So to me, that's a lesson in perseverance, that there's more than one way to get somewhere. And so she went to PCC and did a great job. And the reason I chuckled is because I did the same thing. I went to East Los Angeles College because I was working, thank you, because I was working full-time during the day to help my mother, a single mom, support myself and my younger brothers and sister. So I went to work full-time. I went to East LA College at night, and then I transferred to UC Irvine and ultimately came back and graduated from Cal State Los Angeles. So thank you for that, Maria. And the other thing you said was, don't wait till you get out of college to have fun. You need to start having fun every day. And I'm not sure what I did here, but is that working? So every day you have an opportunity to savor something, enjoy the moment, and be proud of yourself for what you're doing, no matter what it is, how small it is or how large it is, because the small steps get to the big place. So as Chief of Staff of MetroLink, my job primarily is overseeing board relations, because public agencies are overseen by a board of directors, and the board of directors are typically elected officials. So a lot of government relations work goes on in the work of board relations. And I also work with the CEO and all of the other executives to help support the mission of the agency, which of course is public transportation, and more importantly, being environmentally clean as we provide public transit services. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what I do. And I could go on forever, but I'm not going to. I'm going to let my next panelist speak to the floor.
Hi, everyone. I love being here. I love seeing your faces, because working with high school students is what I do. If you all have any questions, always happy to be a resource. But just to share a little bit about my journey, like my fellow panelists, I was also a first-gen college student. I grew up in the high desert after leaving LA, and I decided that I needed to come back to LA. LA felt like home, so I went to UCLA, and I majored in sociology with a minor in public affairs. So that included public policy, social welfare, urban planning, and that's really what got me interested in the public sector. But like probably some of you in this audience, I had no idea what to do as a first-gen student. Like, what career do I pursue? Do I do something for money? Do I do something for service of others? But I was really fortunate to have a lot of opportunities to have paid internships during my time at UCLA. I interned at the Department of Labor in DC. I interned for like private startups in Santa Monica. I interned for museums, and probably some I can't even remember at this point. But all those experiences shaped me, because it made me realize I wanted to work in the public sector, and that working in politics isn't the only way to be in service of others. And so that's what drew me to working in the arts. And so at Las Fotos Project, I get to work with people in the public sector, people like Noelia, but also combine that with like private partnerships. So my work as a social entrepreneur is really making sure that the nonprofit has the resources and the funds to provide free programming to our students. And so I do that by basically running a small business outside of our nonprofit. And the money that we generate from our paid private clients goes back into our nonprofit to make sure we have art supplies, funding to pay our teaching artists, but as well as the money we make pays our students, who are the people on the job getting experience doing photography work for private clients. We photograph for the Golden Globes red carpet, to local galas. We've done product photography for brands like Converse and Viva La Bonita. And it's just exciting to see our students to learn how to use their creative skills to get a job, but also that we can be in service of our community and generate our own revenue to best serve our community how we see fit. So, Las Fotos Project is located in Boyle Heights. If any of you are interested in the creative arts, welcome to roll through. We always have free events.
I'm very partial to Las Fotos Project. Also, Helen used to be my roommate, so have a lot of love there. Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. I'm so happy to be here. I'm really sitting with what you said, Helen, about there's just so many different ways to get involved into politics. There's not one way. I didn't have a very linear path, and I'm just sitting with how much the personal is political. So it's in everything that you do, and you can tie it into everything that you can do. So I started my own business. I'm the CEO of Shift Consulting LLC, and I essentially do racial and gender equity and justice workshops for organizations and companies kind of across the world. As you can imagine, since 2 summers ago, the recommitment to racial justice that has spurred, things have been wild. It's been nuts, and that inherently has impacted the ways that we talk about politics and the ways that we understand systems too. So that means, in terms of doing workshops around racial and gender justice and training around that, that means I work with companies and design sexual harassment prevention policies for companies that didn't even have them in place. That means working with brands, and this year we're actually working with Coachella and Golden Boys to build their safety and inclusion component at their festival. And all of that, so it ultimately, me being at this company means that I do trainings and consultation, but all of that has been shaped from my very clear, direct pathway in what I thought was advocacy work. So I started out doing civic engagement for Planned Parenthood. It was like the direct, clearest way that I could see that I could get involved. But then I saw that I didn't see a lot of people who looked like me out there. Well, I didn't see a lot of Asian Americans in policy and advocacy spaces, and I was craving that. And so I wanted to explore why. Why? What about my racialized identity? What about the gender of my identity that affects the ways my communities are reflected in these spaces? So I explored that a little bit more, and that's what led me to creating Shift Consulting. And I'll leave it there.
So you all touched on this a little from the answers from the previous question, but could you guys talk about what drew you to a career in politics and advocacy and public service?
Sure. I actually never thought I was going to have a career in politics. I studied international relations in college and grad school, and there's, political aspects of that, but I'm going to be honest and admit that I didn't really know much about domestic politics until I got an internship with the speaker. Very, very honest there, right? And the reason I came to Congress to begin with is that I knew that I wanted to be a public servant. And I thought, okay, if I go to Congress, I can figure out what agency I can get a job in, right? I graduated in the middle of the Great Recession in 2010 from grad school, and I couldn't get a job in the federal government. I applied everywhere and I couldn't, that brings you back to the story in my intro that my mentor said, go get this internship. So that's really the core of it for me, right? The public service component was key. I spent some time in DC working for the speaker, and ultimately I spent the bulk of my congressional career in district offices because they're not political. You're really helping one person with one issue. Somebody's Social Security check doesn't come in the mail, and then you work with Social Security to figure out how do you get them a payment so they can pay their rent, they can buy food, they can pay their bills. And so that direct service really spoke to me. And even in the work that I do at UCLA, it's still public service, right? I'm still a state of California employee, and that's really worked too much when they were young, that didn't have great GPAs because they had to work full-time, and if they had more financial aid, they would be able to take out less loans and better experience college in general and get more out of it, right? And so really, I feel like every day in my life, I get to help the kids that look like me, that are from the neighborhoods that I'm from, that are from the backgrounds that I'm from, and that's really humbling, and that really brings me a lot of joy.
So similarly, I did not set out to have a career. I don't know what I keep doing to this microphone. Maybe I'm just energized in some way. I did not set out to have a career in public service or politics. In fact, I remember in college, of course, dating myself, but I graduated in the 80s. The 80s was the me decade, where Wall Street was king and everybody was getting a business degree, and that's what I did. I got my undergraduate because that's the way conditioned us to think. And that was what I was interested in, because I was, again, a single woman, and if I needed to support myself and my loved ones, my family, I needed to go make money, and that's what the mentality was. So it wasn't until the 90s, when I had already established my career at Southern California Edison in corporate communications, that I got a phone call one day from the mayor's in Los Angeles, and Dick Reardon had just been elected mayor about 6 months before, and this person told me that there's a possibility of having an opportunity to compete for the press secretary position for the mayor of Los Angeles. And I specifically said, no thank you, I am not interested in working in government, because I had the stereotypical attitude that a bunch of bureaucrats who just pushed pencils all day long. And this person laughed and she says, no, this would be interesting. So I said, okay, I'll show up for the interview. So I went, not with enthusiasm. And after I left there, my first time at City Hall, which everybody here probably knows where City Hall is, that was my first time at City Hall. And after I left there, I thought, I definitely don't want to work here. I did not like the guy I met with. We just didn't connect, and so thank you very much. And I was a good girl. I sent the thank you note and all of those things. 5 days later was the Northridge earthquake, which you probably have read about in your history books or somewhere. And at that point, it was the worst natural disaster in the history of Los Angeles. And so I called and I said, I'm happy to come and volunteer. I have a ton of vacation. Still not wanting to work there. 3 weeks later, I get a call back from a deputy mayor, and I come in to visit with her, and something just clicked. The energy, the purpose, the mission, the goals of the administration to help people in need whose lives have been devastated. The 10 freeway right out here had collapsed. Completely collapsed, not far from here, maybe about a mile from here. So being a part of that Washington connection, the DC, the Sacramento connection was just so exciting. So 2 weeks later, I was working at City Hall as a press secretary, and I had no idea what a press secretary did. But Dick Reardon had never been in public office before. He didn't have any idea what a mayor did. So together, we worked really well, because you know why? We operated with the mantra of, it's easier to get forgiveness than to get permission. And that was how I learned about public service and getting things done, especially at the local level. Of course, less than 10 years later, I was working at the White House in the office of the president. Yes, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, because of my work at City Hall. And I'll tell you another secret. At that point, I had been a lifelong Democrat. So I was a Democrat working in a Republican administration, which tells you a little bit about how politics was 20 years ago. There was this thing called bipartisanship, where we could disagree but be respectful of the disagreements. And unfortunately, that shifted along the way, and it makes me very sad in my heart as a public servant, but hopeful also that thanks to all of you who are now interested in going into politics and public service are going to shift that back so that you can disagree respectfully, but with the purpose that you have common ground and doing something on behalf of people that rely on those who are in decision-making positions in government.
Yeah. I'm actually wondering if you know one of my mentors who encouraged me to go into public service. His name is Rick Tuttle. He's the controller. Oh, what a small
I
world.
don't know him well, but I know
Yeah.
I've met him, yes.
So my journey to public service was very similar to what's just shared. It was not my intention. I had a really rough transition at UCLA. I was a first-gen student, was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, wasn't really getting supports I needed. And I realized that there was a lot of my peers going through the same experience. And I knew then that I wanted to work in a position that would help youth, help first-gen students feel supported and successful and strong, no matter what they choose to do. And that was the only thing I knew. Where I was gonna do that, how I was gonna do that, I had no clue. So that's why I did a ton of internships to figure out what sector would let me do this work. And so my internship at the Department of Labor, summer of 2012, was really formative. It was with Secretary Solis. I was working in her close office and really got some mentorship and learned for the first time what is public administration? What does that degree mean? And Secretary Solis and a lot of her staff members are Trojans, and they did the MPA here at USC. And that's when I said, okay, this is how I'm gonna do this work, this is where I wanna do it, and this will be my next step. And it was just through that, just confirming through other internship experiences in the private sector and tech that I realized, yes, public service is where I want to be, and I'm gonna figure out how to make this work. And really, USC was a really great program for me to explore that. It was really great mentors. I was working full-time while doing my master's program. It was quite difficult, but I always felt supported by the community here, and it was through those professors who challenged me, it was through mentors like Rick Tuttle, who was my professor at UCLA, that I realized that public service could be a space for someone like me. And it was just the professors here at USC that challenged me, what can you do with your skill sets? You know marketing, you know you want to be in public service, you love working with youth, and that's kind of how I found myself in social entrepreneurship. It's like working in business, but for a cause, right? Like the money we make goes to fix a social need that we see in our society. And so that's what really invigorates me, is getting to work in this intersection of public and private.
Thank you, Helen. And everyone's stories have been so beautiful, so I just want to remember the question. It was how I got into this.
Yes.
Got it. Okay, great. Because everyone was so engrossing, so I just totally forgot the question. For me, I knew I wanted to get into some form of politics. And it was, again, very much shaped because of my identity, because I didn't see other people who looked like me in that space. I knew that I didn't want to be put in, growing up, I knew at a very young age, I didn't want to be put in a box because everyone else put me in a box. They always assumed that I would become a doctor, that I would be a lawyer, that I would work in tech, that I would not be politically loud in how I wanted to work into advocacy spaces. I very much wanted to challenge the model minority myth at a young age, even before I knew what was the model minority myth. And so when I examined that more, when I recognized what systems were put in place to condition us for Asian Americans to be a certain way, for other communities to view us a certain way, I knew, I was like, I need to get out of that mold, and I wanted to step into advocacy work. But with that, I also realized, like, there are so many ways to do advocacy work, and there's so many ways to influence the advocacy space, and I was really craving more play and fun in advocacy work, and I think that's so important to bring that element and that creativity as well, and which is where I started doing more illustration work. It was really important for me to see other communities of color and Asian Americans be politicized, to be advocating for what was affecting their communities. And so I started drawing, and I started getting asked to draw some more movement campaign works, and I started working for, I recently did a collaboration with the Democratic National Committee to inspire and help other young women see that they can be reflected in this space, but in so many different ways, that there's more than one way to approach policy and advocacy work. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you for sharing these incredibly inspiring and personal stories. So for our final question, we'll leave off with some action items before we turn it over to the students. So, two-part question. What advice would you give to your high school self with what you know now, and what are some tangible tips and resources that you can share with our students here today?
So the advice I'd give myself is, regardless of whatever job, internship, whatever it is that you're doing, even if you think it's beneath you, there is something there that you're going to learn that is going to be a building block for your next step, or maybe something way down the line. Perfect example, straight out of grad school, I took a job as an executive assistant. I had to make the water levels all the same, all the same, all the same for meetings. I know that seems silly, but that attention to detail has served me in so many amazing ways as a professional, right? So that's the first thing. In every single job that you're in, there's something that you can learn. You really try not to have an ego about it or think that you're better than it. And then the second thing, or the thing that you can start working on, is you can start building your community. You hear people talk about networking, and I know that seems kind of, you don't really know what that means, or it's scary or whatever, but really what it means is you start building relationships with people around you. And you don't just reach out to them when you need something, right? So you can, if it can be a teacher, it can be, someone's older sibling, but you don't just reach out to them when you need them. You ask them for advice, and you help the people that are coming up after you, right? So when somebody comes to you, you also create that space for them. So that's what I would say now. Build your network, and don't just reach out to people when you need something, and also be there for others.
Totally agree with everything that you just said, because I also started working as we used to call them secretaries back then, an executive assistant. But the other side of that coin is, don't think you're too small or not good enough for something. That's what I would tell myself. I always thought, I'm not good enough for that. That's for the smart people, or the beautiful people, or the X people, or the people that live in somewhere else, not in my neighborhood. Don't exclude yourself, is what my message is. Don't exclude yourself. In your long lives, you're going to be excluded by other people, intentionally, unintentionally. So don't make it easier for them. You know what I mean? You need to show up for yourself, because you are more than good enough. And even if you have a day where you're just good enough, that's perfect as well. And that's what I would say. There's so many other things in life. I wish I had not hesitated as much as I did at certain moments. Hesitation is not your friend. But I'll leave it at that.
Thank you both. I echo both of what you just said. I think to add to that, I would say to my younger self, don't stress about the future. Enjoy your present moment, enjoy the phase that you're in, enjoy whatever internship or class or experience you're having. Just really be present to that moment and what you can gain from those experiences. And then in regards to the second question, I know many of you raised your hand, you're not 18, you can't vote. What are ways that we can be civically involved? I'm a big supporter of mutual aid. That is a way that we can serve the people around us that doesn't require us to be of voting age. Some of my favorite mutual aid organizations here in LA is Period Project LA. It was actually started by one of our Las Fotos Project students. They put together drives to get menstrual products into the hands of women who are living across Los Angeles that don't have access to that, and that's really huge. The second is Polo's Pantry here in Los Angeles. They provide access to healthy foods to Angelinos all across LA through monthly food drives, distributions. They're always looking for people to support, whether it's drop-offs or monitoring the fridges, or even going to help the farmers pack the produce boxes. There's just so many ways we can serve the community around us.
There's so many I wish I'd known before starting my own business, but I'll start with three. I'll start with one. Any only feelings of inadequacy are not from you, they are the systems around you. You are going to sometimes feel like an imposter. Exactly like what someone said earlier about not feeling good enough. Other people will also make you not feel good enough because there's not a lot of people like us in those positions of power. So if they don't make you feel good enough, it's not you, it's the systems in place, it's the conditions built, and that the institutions need you more than you need them. So that's something I wish I'd known earlier. Secondly, I really resonate with what you said, Helen. I wish I enjoy the moment and really challenge hustle culture and busy work and try and work till death and being busy all the time. It's just not a healthy way of being, and there's so much more on life outside of your career, and that took me a long time, and I'm still learning how to do that. And the last thing I think I will say is that this is really big for me as like a small business owner, but don't get caught up in the cloud of big names and big brands. They're really flashy, and they're really, and they come off with a really big sense of importance, but don't get caught up in that. Find value-aligned organizations to work with, and you will be fine. You will be fine if you find value-aligned organizations and what you believe in your style. It's going to be great if you do it that way. That's all I got.
And since I have a microphone again, I'm going to take advantage of it. Two things that I also want to add. And one is, when I was in high school, in your age, my parents are going through a very difficult divorce. And so I suffered in silence a lot. And I thought it was my fault. There was something I could have done to keep them together, because I'm the oldest child. And so if you're going through any kind of stress like that, family, boyfriend, girlfriend, don't suffer in silence. Find somebody that you can talk to. There's no shame, and it's actually healthy for you to ask for help. And the other thing I would say is, it was harder when I was, in high school in terms of finding somebody who looked like me, who could be a mentor. They weren't around. That's why I've always been really generous with my time with young women and men who don't have others who they can connect to. So, but don't just go for somebody who looks like you, thinks like you, acts like you, believes like you. My mentor in life, when I was 21 years old, he was a supervisor of mine at Edison, a middle-aged white guy. And all these years later, we still stay in touch. And if I have a major life decision to make, I always call Don Sedan, because he had faith in me, and he saw something in me, and he happened to be a white guy, and so I wasn't going to say no to that gift of wisdom. So I would leave you with that as well.
Thank you for sharing all this super useful advice. I hope you all learned a lot. I know I certainly did. And now it's time for you all to ask questions. So I think you can raise your hand and then speak up so we can hear your question, and you can direct it to one of our panelists or multiple of them. So
if you all want to raise your hands, I'll pick on you, and then just project. Since we only have one mic, we are improvising. And then Shweta, if you could just repeat the question back so that everybody hears it. So who has a question? Yes, you in the back.
So, as your name, what school are you from, and then pass it on. My name is Joel Sanders. I'm from City of Angels Independent Study, and I want to know, how could we as high schoolers get involved with government now?
just to reiterate, how can high school students get involved with government now?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm going to speak from the federal lens. A lot of members of, I would encourage you to look at your members of Congress on the House and the Senate side. A lot of them have youth councils, youth advisory councils. So that would be the first thing. See if your member of Congress has a youth advisory council. And if they don't, suggest that they start one. So that's one way. Another way would be to volunteer, right? Volunteer with an elected official, volunteer on an event. If you want to, volunteer on their campaign. They always need people on their campaign, so find someone that you know is doing things that you like in your community and you can volunteer for them. Those are just a couple ways.
Yeah, I would echo the same thing. When I was at Harvard University about 10 years ago, I hosted President Obama's, he had just gotten elected to office, and I hosted his campaign manager to come and speak to the students. And of course, all the students, they want to go into politics and they want to be on campaigns, but they want to start as the chief of staff. And I remember David Plouffe, who was the campaign manager, said a successful campaign manager, and even a successful candidate, at some point would have started posting lawn signs out for a campaign. Because you meet people, you see face to face what's going on. So something as simple as posting lawn signs is really an act of getting involved in politics and public service. So everything counts.
Just to add to what was shared about youth councils, LA just started its first ever youth council, and the application was open, I think, as of this week. So if this is something you're interested in, go to LA City website, look up their youth council. Yes?
The application closed, actually.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
2 days ago. 2 days ago? Oh, okay, well,
Good for you for looking into it.
yeah, good for knowing that. Well, in that case, when applications reopen, make sure to apply. Follow some organizations. Inner City Struggle is a great organization in the city that does a lot of work with youth advocacy. There's also another organization slipping my mind, but they do amazing, amazing work in getting youth to pre-register to vote. You know that we can pre-register as from 17 on? And they're always looking for youth to lead these initiatives and these campaigns. I have the info on my phone, so I'll grab it after if anyone's interested.
Thank you. I also second volunteering, emailing those organizations you want to work with, even if they don't have a position, and just meet people for coffee that are in the field that you want to be. Like, who are your work people crushes, right? Like, who do you aspire to be? Like, hit them up, grab them up, take them out to coffee, and then learn more about what they do. The other flip side, I remember applying to so many internships and so many volunteer positions and never hearing back. So if you see a need for something and you don't see accessible space to get involved in it, I would suggest starting it with your own friends. If you see that you want more written articles about something or think pieces on things, start a zine, right? Like, don't ask for permission, just do it with your friends. And I'm sure it'll be way better than what's already out there too.
Yeah, when I was in high school, the first thing I did to get involved in politics was canvassing for a local elected official, so plenty of tangible ways to get involved even at your age. Another question? Let's do it right up here.
Hi, my name is Shelby Coleman. I go to West Torrance High School. So my question is, how did being a woman affect your path, especially in politics?
Great question.
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. And it's not just being a woman, right? For me, it's being a woman of color that also was first gen. So it's not that I didn't have a parent to go home to say, okay, so do I have to wear pantyhose? I didn't know, right? So a lot of it was just figuring out what was expected in the space and where I was in the space and finding out how to make that work for me, right? So this was the expectation, okay, but how do I make that my own, right? I heard someone at a women's leadership summit a while ago say something, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but she said that when she walks into a room and she's the only woman, she knows that she has to be 50%, she has 50% of the voice of the country in that room, and that gives her strength to do whatever she needs to do, even if someone asks her to do something that's inappropriate, like get coffee or talks down to her or whatever. And that really resonated with me. So certainly I think that I've had challenges that than some of my male counterparts haven't, but I think that they've made me stronger, they've made me a better public servant, and they've made me a better representative of my community.
Thank you. Yeah, I've had the whole spectrum of, no, we can't give you that promotion because you're too young. Even though I've done the work, gotten the reviews, showed the results and the accomplishments. Or, we're going to look into that and maybe down the road. Well, I've been doing the work now, not down the road. So just be aware of those kinds of signals that, and if you can't change them, then you need to make a decision whether that's the place that you want to continue affiliating with. And find a way, and if you want to, then you need to find a way to voice your opinion and show the results. Don't be silenced just because, you know, you raised it once. Once is not enough if you're not getting a reasonable response to something. I actually think I'm sitting here trying to think of good examples of when I was starting out, but I actually think they were so difficult that I put them out of my mind because they're not worth having the rent in my brain anymore. I'm focused on now and in the future and helping the next generation come through. It's just, that's what I would say is don't let it consume you with negative thoughts. Do something positive and move on about it. And if you have a specific, question about it, we can talk afterwards.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Layla. I go to Dr. Maya Angelou Community High School. And my question is, if you guys are all accomplished women, so my question is, can you describe a failed project or when things didn't go your way? And what is something that you will tell us as high school students with dealing with that, with dealing with failure or not necessarily it being so successful?
Okay, we'll start at the end.
I'm thinking about failure is like a really, really personally scary thing. I feel like we're constantly having to put ourselves out there in just our existence in general. So when I think about the work I do and the work that I put out there, especially on racial and gender justice, a lot of people aren't always happy with it. I get a lot of criticism for it. And so I'm also a very sensitive person, so I take that criticism super seriously, super personally. And one quote that has really stayed with me was like, unless you're not getting your ass kicked in the arena, your feedback does not matter to me. Like, just being selective on the feedback that you sit with and which ones you do take, because that feedback still is important. But yeah, just stressing, unless you're getting your ass kicked out there too, then you have no point in contributing to what I'm doing and how I'm doing it.
Thanks, Nat. I started chuckling at this question because I listened to a piece of advice Natalie gave me a long time ago, which is that I'm always like failing. A big part of like entrepreneurship is like trying new ideas, failing, trying again. And it was something I was really struggling with, especially someone who's like, things need to be perfect, right? Like, we're always striving for that. Yeah. And then one day when I was having breakfast with Natalie, and she told me, strive for integrity, not perfection. And those words have really stayed with me now, because in this work that we do, and actually in any work that we do, you're going to fail. It's just human nature. But what you do as a response to learn and grow from that, to apply that to whatever you do in the future, that's what lets us strive for integrity and lets us actually move things forward in our work.
I forgot about that one. Thank you for
Yeah.
It reminds me of the saying that perfection is the enemy of the good. Focus on the good. Perfection might follow, and if it doesn't, the good is what's important. But I had to laugh when the question came, not out of disrespect, but the first thing that came into my head was a personal example where I was stressing out over something that I'm not even going to tell you what it was. It was so silly, but it consumed me. And I was with my mom, and she could see me working at just getting all worked up into a lather, and she says, "Mija, stop. You need to realize you're not perfect." I started laughing. I said, "Thank you so much for that permission." So give yourself permission to fail, because if you don't fail, then you're not human. And believe me, I've had my share of failures, and I'm proud of them, actually.
Well, I think that's the point, right? I think all of us on here have failed more times than we have not. I'm half Japanese, and there's a saying, "Nana karobi na uki." It's fall down 7 times, get up 8, and that's really the crux of it, right? Also, I played sports growing up, and you lose all the time playing sports, and so really something you learn and you internalize as an athlete is you win or you learn. So if you do fail, you take it apart, figure out how you messed it up, what you could have done better, and you do whatever you can to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Great questions, y'all. Okay, we can take a couple more. Yes.
Hi, my name is Ariana Carlos. I'm in 10th grade. I go to Glen Eagles High School. And my question is, how did you find clarity in yourself on what you wanted to do and really commit to it?
I'm still looking for that clarity. I think that the biggest lesson that I've learned professionally is that opportunities present themselves, and sometimes you're not ready for them. And as a woman, I always say, well, I'm not ready for that. I'm not prepared enough. Someone else is going to be better at it than I am. I'm going to do it later. And that's just not how the world works, right? So when the opportunity presents itself, you just have to jump at it and figure it out as you go.
I guarantee you men don't say that to themselves. They will apply for that top job even though they've only been working for a year or something like that. So try to take that mentality, and I agree. I have no idea what I want to do when I grow up. I'm still trying to figure it out. Maybe you guys can give me some ideas.
Yeah, like everyone just shared, I'm still learning, I'm still figuring out. I think the one thing to know is that to really reflect on who you are in that moment, what your values are in that moment, because we are constantly changing. Who I was when I was sitting in your chairs is not who I am now. And so the clarity I have in each phase has impacted the work I've done in each phase.
Yeah, that's all. I just agree with everything they said.
Okay, unfortunately, we only have so much time for this panel, so we're gonna take a brief break before lunch, but let's give our guests a round of applause.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to hear the day's going well. Like Erica said, I'm Chloe Hirth. I'm a senior at USC studying political science and communications, and I'm also pursuing a master's in public policy. If any of you have any questions about USC or things like that after, come up and say hi. But I'm going to introduce our phenomenal panelists, starting with Tara Campbell. Tara Campbell is the former mayor of Yorba Linda, California, and made history as the youngest female mayor in California history, and in United States history for a city of 30,000 or more. She is also a Trojan. Tara currently works for the County of Orange as Chief of Staff to a County Supervisor, working on issues like homelessness, public health, transportation, infrastructure, and public safety. Woo. We now have Tanya Ortiz Franklin. Tanya Ortiz Franklin is the board member for LA Unified School Board District 7, where she was previously a student, teacher, educator, and advocate. While in law school, she began working at the Partnership for Los Angeles Schools, a nonprofit that manages 19 Los Angeles Unified Schools in Boyle Heights, South Los Angeles, and Watts, where she first focused on educator development, then on school culture and equitable policies and practices. To my left, we have Gloria Molina. Gloria was the first Chicana elected to the California State Assembly, representing the 56th District in 1992. She was also the first Latina to join the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors, where she served for more than 2 decades, as she is a fall 2021 fellow at the Center for the Political Future. Last but definitely not least, we have Mona Field, who is the board president of the League of Women Voters of Greater Los Angeles. She is also a professor emeritus of political science at Glendale Community College, trustee emeritus for the Los Angeles Community College District, and was elected 4 times by the voters of the Los Angeles Community College District to serve as a member of the governing board of the nation's largest community college district. We are in the presence of some amazing women. So to start off, can we hear a little bit from each of you about what you do, your career journey, what brought you here today, starting with Tara, and then we'll move this way.
Well, hello everyone. I'm excited to be back at the old stomping grounds at USC. So, like she mentioned, obviously I'm a Trojan. So when I went here though, I wanted to do sports journalism. Obviously a really great place for that. And thought I should broaden my experience, so I went to do an internship for C-SPAN in Washington, D.C. Well, that internship fell through, and so I ended up working for a bipartisan nonprofit trying to get members of Congress to work together. Believe it or not, somebody's out there trying to do that. And thought I was doing all this great work, but then the government shut down, and this was in 2013. So I saw government gridlock at its finest. Couldn't get along, couldn't work it out, so they just shut it down, right? Came back to my hometown to find that my city council was in the midst of a recall. And apparently that wasn't uncommon for my city. So it really made me realize we need good people in government, so I decided to shift gears. I added political science as a major here at USC, ended up getting my master's, served on the Parks and Recreation Commission in Yorba Linda. Anyone ever seen Parks and Rec, the show? I'm Leslie Knope, that's the easiest way to describe it. And then 2 years later, I ran for city council at the very old age of 22 and got elected. And then a couple years later, 2 years later, when I was 25, I became mayor of my hometown. So it's crazy how quickly it all happened. I never thought I would ever be doing this. But at the end of the day, I realized we need good people in government with the right intentions and a good heart for service. And I hope you all are encouraged in hearing that same message that you should be involved and engaged, even now at a young age, to give back to your community.
Well, hello, good afternoon. I am Tanya Ortiz-Franklin, school board member for LA Unified. I've only served for about 14 months. I was just elected in November of 2020. And my trajectory is that I grew up about 20 minutes south of here from a single mom who immigrated from Mexico when she was a kid, went to public schools in LA Unified, graduated alongside less than half of my incoming freshman class, and thought I should do something about it. I was lucky to go to college in New York City, the only one of my classmates who applied to and got into an Ivy League. I loved Columbia, loved New York, but there's no place like home. So I came back, I was a middle school teacher for 5 years, got laid off in the Great Recession. I taught middle school, so fun. And went to law school. I went to UCLA, that was neglected from the bio, that's okay. Nothing but love, nothing but love. And in law school, I really thought about the systemic change needed for more kids to be eligible for great schools like UCLA and USC. And so I worked for a nonprofit for several years, supporting teachers, advocating, knocking on the doors of LA Unified, and when my seat opened up, about a year and a half before I decided to win a big battle in the election, I was really encouraged by my neighbors, by friends in the work that I had done, to say, this is home for you, this is a big opportunity to help more kids get ready for college. You should put your name in the hat. And it's a lot, we'll talk about campaigns, I'm sure, but I feel so privileged to get to serve 600,000 kids in the city. Just my district alone is 600,000 residents, so hopefully many of them vote, not all of them do, for school board. And we have some big decisions to make. We just hired a new superintendent. He's 3 weeks on the job. We're very excited about him. We make big decisions about pandemic rules, whether or not we wear masks indoors, whether or not we focus on assessments and student learning. And I feel super privileged every day to get to hear from my constituents about what matters to them and try my best to amplify the voices of those who've been pushed to the margins for far too long. So my goal is really educational and racial justice in the system that raised me, and I'm so glad to be with you this afternoon.
Good afternoon, I'm Gloria Molina. I hope I can take this off, it's really warm in here. But anyway, I've been involved in the political system for 50 years, one way or another, as an advocate. I retired from the Board of Supervisors in 2014 after serving 22 years. Before that, I was on City Council, and then, of course, I was in the legislature. I was elected in 1982. as the first Latina to the legislature. And I'm very proud of that because I've been followed by some very wonderful and powerful Latinas that are serving and doing such a great job. Right. Even though I'm retired, I am the chair presently of the California Community Foundation, and I'm also on the board of directors of the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund. In my retirement, I've organized a Latina quilt group. I'm a quilter, and we have over 65 members, and we enjoy doing that. That's part of our hobby. And of course, I just became an abuelita, so that's really important to me. But I continue to stay active, and I'm very involved. But I started out as an advocate. Believe it or not, Mona knows, 50 years ago, it was very, very different. The whole landscape was very different. And so my job, or at least when I ran for office, it wasn't to become a politician. It was to demonstrate to a group of power brokers in the east side of LA that Latinas should be at the table when we're making the important decisions about our families and our future and our children. And they dismissed us when we first wanted to run for office. And so eventually we found a seat that we could run in. No one else was willing to run. I was supposed to be the political director. I ended up being the candidate. But anyway, it's been an interesting journey, and I never thought when I was your age that this is what I would be doing all of those years and serving in these very interesting and very respectful roles. It has been an honor for me to serve.
Before I begin, I do want to introduce my colleague here, who's a Trojan. Naj, would you stand? This is Dr. Ninotchka McTaggart, and graduated from USC in 2004 and subsequently earned a doctorate, and is now the executive director of the League of Women Voters of Greater LA. And just so you know that after the panel, we've set up our table there. We have voter registration information, which, by the way, you can register at age 16. You can't vote yet, but you can pre-register. And we have QR codes in case you want to grab that and run, or we have a paper form if any of you still use paper and pen for anything. So I started in the same era as Gloria, and my activism began in high school, at Hollywood High School. And in those days, you may find it hard to believe, but what we organized around, in addition to supporting movements against the war in Vietnam and civil rights and women's rights, we wanted to change the dress code because girls could not wear pants to public school. And some of you are looking at me like, oh, no, that can't be true. It was true. So I'm just saying my issues started from a very kind of personal level, like I wanted to be able to wear pants on a cold day. And I ended up staying involved as I went through college and graduate school, and my dream career was to teach at a community college, and I was so lucky, and I thought this is it, the pinnacle. But amazingly, through a lot of community activism, I ended up also kind of choosing a path to become a union leader, a faculty union leader, and then eventually to run for public office. And I would just say, when you follow your passion, and especially in my opinion, probably the other panelists would agree, when your passion is to make the world better in some way, things will fall into place for your professional life, your personal life. I, like Gloria, just also became an abuelita recently, and I'm enjoying that part of life. But I encourage you, do follow the passion. It leads to amazing things that you would never have expected.
But I want to backtrack a little bit and talk about what first drew you to public service, politics, or advocacy, and hear a little bit more about that from all of you. We'll start with there you go.
Sure. So I briefly mentioned in my opening that I graduated alongside less than half of my incoming freshman class. And the reason I say that so often, that was about 20 years ago, is because back then it was so normal. People didn't question that Black and brown and poor kids didn't graduate from high school, much less pursue college. But for me, that felt like injustice, and injustice feels like anger, and you feel like you want to do something healthy with that anger. So I went to college in New York and met kids who were so privileged, kids who who went to private boarding schools for high school that was just a completely different world than what I had grown up in. Kids for whom college wasn't a question, it was which Ivy League school they were going to go to. And so I actually started getting interested in public education through my work study job. I needed money from the university, and we had a program that would tutor kids in Harlem, and I just fell in love with being in front of kids and helping them fall in love with reading and field trips around the city. And I thought, this is how I could dedicate my career. I could help kids love learning and reading. I could make the conditions better for them in their schools, in their after-school program, and I could help make big decisions about this. I joined a program called Teach for America. Anybody heard of Teach for America? They probably advertise all over USC. I actually thought I wanted to do that as my work study job, but didn't realize you had to graduate with a bachelor's first. And the reason I joined is because it was so mission driven. It was one day all children in this nation will have the opportunity to attain an excellent education. That your zip code doesn't determine your destiny. And so I taught for 5 years in a school that fit right into my high school. It was home for me. And then I got laid off, and that, again, anger, that personal decision motivated me to go to law school and think I should change the policies that create the situations where students and teachers and families feel like no one is centering them or prioritizing them. It took a while to figure out exactly how to do that, but I think my message around this question would really be, listen to your emotions. Sometimes women are, I don't know what the right word is, but not always looked upon as fondly for expressing their emotions. It might be looked at as a negative thing to be too emotional about something. But I would say your emotion is your power, your emotion is your strength, your emotion is your passion that could change the world. And so I leaned into my emotions, and that's why I am where I am here today.
I'll be quick and we'll pass it back. So I kind of talked about how it had been a lot of recalls in my hometown for our city council. In fact, there had been 8 potential recalls in the past 15 elections, which is odd. That seems like a lot. And so that's what pushed me to kind of get more involved and figure out what was going on. But there was a lot of disconnect between the residents and City Hall. Residents didn't feel like they knew what was going on, and they didn't feel like they were part of the decision-making practice. So I really got engaged in that issue, and one of the things I think that as young people, we grew up with technology, and so bringing that perspective and that skill set into City Hall, really bringing us into the 21st century, most importantly so that we could connect with our residents, because that's the only way that we're going to hear about the issues that are happening in our community. We have to hear from our residents so that we can make those changes, and vice versa. We need to be sharing with our community what is happening at City Hall and getting that feedback. My city did not have any social media. I got elected in 2016. Social media was definitely a thing before then, okay? Our website was archaic. We didn't have, you had to come into City Hall for forms. I mean, come on guys, we all pay for things online nowadays, right? So sometimes it was those little changes. In fact, our City Hall was on paper time cards still. So there's a lot of efficiency and effectiveness that can be changed, even at the local levels of government, that can make a big difference. So that's just one of the things that got me to run and get engaged.
Well, I'm proud to say that in the 50 years of activism that I've been involved in, that we sort of patted down the grass for many of you, and hopefully all of you are going to be looking at doing that in the future as well. For me, my start was, of course, I was a legal secretary attending East LA College, the community college in East Los Angeles. Got involved with, at that time, was called the Mexican American Student Association, MASA. Now it's called MECHA. And listening to great speakers all the way from Cesar Chavez, Congressman Esteban Torres, so many other people. And of course, listening at statistics about where we were as far as opportunity, whether educational, whether employment opportunity. But the statistics, particularly the Vietnam War was going on, and we were losing more and more Latinos proportionately than in any other area. So our young men were being sent to the front lines on a regular basis. So of course, many of us were against the war in Vietnam, and of course I participated in a protest in Vietnam. It was called the Chicano Moratorium. Unfortunately, it became unruly. The sheriffs got very aggressive, and it became very violent in East Los Angeles. But it really gave me the impetus to get involved with the Chicano issues that were going on in our community. Regrettably, the Chicanos that were part of MASA at that time were very sexist. They relegated us to making the menudo for fundraisers. At that time, you mimeographed information. So we did all of the secretarial kind of work for them, which wasn't very satisfying. The feminist movement had just started as well, started attending a lot of activities with the feminist movement. Regrettably, it was very white, and it was also very racist from time to time, not including us. So I started our own organization called Comisión Femenil Mexicana. It was a Chicana feminist organization. I became the president or the chair of it. We were activists for creating employment opportunities for women. We developed an employment training center. We developed the first bilingual bicultural child care centers because women can't work unless they have quality child care. And then we went on to create other kinds of programs in schools and so on. But I was particularly proud that we were the class action plaintiffs against LA County, which was interesting later on serving in LA County, we were class action plaintiffs in a lawsuit against the county for the forced sterilization of Chicanas at LA County, USC. And so this is the kind of work that I think once I got involved, there was just so much to do and so much that needed to be done. And of course, trying to get a Latina elected to the US Congress, which was our goal, the first Latina. Regrettably, again, the power brokers, the men in the community didn't permit that to happen. So we had to get ourselves organized and put together our own campaign. And hopefully, I was going to be the political director and the fundraiser, and it turned out, and because nobody else would run because we're going to lose our behinds. But instead, we were very fortunate. We had a very good campaign, and I was elected as the first Latina. And from then on, it's been amazing how we need to continue to advocate. We made so much progress, but when I see some of the things that are going on today, particularly in Texas, as far as women's opportunity and trampling our rights, we really have to have a new group of young women that are going to get involved in advocacy and continue those kinds of battles, because regrettably, we're regressing in many, many ways. But hopefully we can change that. I'm always positive about the future, but I'm particularly positive. I taught a class here at USC. I was fascinated with these young people that are so bright and so talented. I hope they go out there, like many of you, and look at serving in the community. Be a civic leader. Even if you're a painter or you're a scientist or you're an entertainer, think about contributing and volunteering in a civic way. There's so much that we need from you, your skill set and your talent.
Well, I had one advantage, I think. I came from a home where there was a lot of focus on civic engagement. When I think I was not even 10 years old, my mother had me walking with her to elect someone you may not have even heard of, Governor Pat Brown. That was the father of Jerry Brown. And she was involved in Women for Peace, which was an anti-nuclear organization, who would have thought that now in 2022 we would be worried again about nuclear weapons and the possible use of them. So I was lucky, and even in my teens I was involved and my parents were supportive, which helps. But I would say too that a lot of what matters on a day-to-day basis can become the basis of what Gloria referred to, your civic engagement. You know, what it's like in your neighborhood. Are there problems with, the uncollected garbage? Are there homeless people who are currently experiencing that? And I think pretty much everyone has to say yes. We've seen the tragedy, and we know something has to be done differently. Whatever it is, and then too, if it's about your passion around the arts or culture or journalism, whatever it is, as you are in that path through your education, through your career, moments will come and you'll say, I want to get involved. This is affecting people. It's affecting me, my family, the people I work with, and it will lead to the engagement. And I want to echo what Gloria said. Not everyone has to run for public office, although that would be great. There's so many community organizations at all levels. You may end up speaking in front of your city council or your school board or a bunch of public agencies or public bodies, but we need activism at all levels, and you can find a way to balance activism and involvement with your career, with your family. It takes a lot of juggling at some moments in our lives where everything's happening at once, but I would encourage you to think about, and it's not too soon, what do you care about? And as you pursue your college career and your major and the clubs you join while you're in college, that's the beginning of the path towards your activism, which, in my opinion, it's a lifelong commitment. So.
Cool. So amidst all the success that you all experienced, of course, I'm sure it wasn't always easy. I'm sure there were obstacles. Can you share a little bit about how you personally embraced failure and perhaps some tangible tips for success with the students here?
You cannot look at failure as you're doomed and you can't get it done. It's only one step. You should learn from that. You should move forward. It's your own personal passion. If you care about something, you're going to fight for it no matter what. I've been involved in all these years, and I have had various failures, many successes, but I've also had failures that turned into success because I continued to pursue the issue, because I cared about it. And we continue to do this kind of work constantly, just like now, in the whole issue, what's going on with the Supreme Court and pro-choice. We now need to band together, get together as activists again, and find our way to start changing that, to make sure that we have opportunities for young women to make their own choices as they pursue their career, as they pursue their future. So the reality is that if you learn from it, it's valuable. But do not look at it I mean, you're going to be sad, and you're never going to cry in public, by the way. But you can cry at home, and it happens from time to time. And sometimes you want to give up. But remember, you care about these things. These are important to you. So you embrace failure, and you learn from it, and you move forward.
I think it's an important question, and yet I might even say failure isn't the word I use. Disappointment, and as Gloria said, sometimes you cry, but when you lose a battle, whether it's an election, whether it's an issue, whether you're one of the people voting, like our two elected officials, and you're on the losing side, right, of that vote, which I'm sure you both experienced, it doesn't mean you failed. It means you stood up for what you thought was best. You didn't happen to win the battle, but as Gloria said, you continue pursuing your concern, you push, and also I want to make one additional comment on this. It's okay to disagree with people, but you may be on the same side next time. So what you want to avoid is alienating those who you disagree with on issue X, because next week you're voting on issue Y and you're on the same side. And I like the phrase, look for the commonalities. No matter who you're dealing with, maybe you are very, very different on the issues, you disagree on a lot of things. Even if it ends up you both like flowers, you like something really basic together that you share, use that to have a connection or at least a civil relationship, because you don't want to go around life. I don't think it helps being so angry because people disagree with you that you can't work with them. You want to maintain those civil working relationship as you go through all these experiences.
Mona's absolutely correct. I think you're good at it. And regrettably, but sometimes your passion does overcome, and you do that. But I agree with her, even like I said, I needed to work on it all of the time, but it is an important element. You know me.
No, they both said it really well, and I agree with, especially with the last statement. Me and my colleagues, we don't always agree on everything, but but we respect each other. And I think that that's really critical to having civil discourse on any policy issue. There's definitely been times where maybe I've advocated for an issue and I take that and it didn't go the way I wanted. Or you get that angry email from a constituent later on, later on in the evening. And I remember particularly one issue, got that angry email from a constituent later in the evening. And I actually met with her and we actually turned it into creating a new program for the city that actually is really beneficial and worked out in that community's favor. And so as much as it started off on not a great foot about an issue, we met and were able to create a program that actually worked for the city. So taking not, to the point of, you're not considering it a failure, but a learning lesson and moving forward from there.
I couldn't agree more that failure is really an opportunity, and one example that comes to mind is my first budget vote last June. $20 billion we're voting on here because we have a lot of COVID recovery dollars. Normally the district's budget is still about $15 billion. And I just thought we shouldn't be trying to hire all these folks that might not exist. Let's lower the number of people that we want to put in our budget right now and be more realistic. Well, I didn't do the work required to get that passed at I called it a Hail Mary budget amendment last June. So I put this idea out there. None of my colleagues agreed with me. They thought, maybe that's an interesting idea, but have you really thought this through? How will we do this differently? What is your suggestion? When the budget team had presented something, I didn't have a clear answer other than we shouldn't do that. So I learned very much through the summer and the fall to just build relationships with my colleagues and what mattered most to them. And we've been meeting with the budget team regularly to say, what is happening this year? What should we be doing differently next year? And so I was grateful for the mask because they couldn't see how red my cheeks got when my first budget amendment fell flat on its face. But I think there was so much learning from that experience that hopefully this year's budget, I'm feeling in a much better place months ahead because I've been working with my colleagues, because I've been working with the experts. And so I absolutely agree, thinking about failure as an opportunity to approach things differently really does work. And the last thing I'll say about failure is, I work in public education, and if we don't have a growth mindset, we don't have much going for us. And when I hear students say things that adults have repeated before them, it just breaks my heart. Simple things like, I can't draw, or I'm not a math person. These are these failures that we've let add up in our head, particularly women around the math message. And I think, what would I want my younger siblings to be able to say? What do I want my future children to be able to say? I never want them to say, I can't do this. I might want them to say, I can't do this yet. And so just the power of the word yet and giving yourself that possibility, I think is really powerful for thinking about growth in all of the areas that you might see as growth areas.
Thank you all. So we're going to have one more question before we move into audience questions. So I want to ask you all to think back a little bit ago to when you were in high school, like the young women that are here, and what advice would you give yourself with all the wisdom that you have now? Who wants to start?
Well, believe it or not, I was a very frightened high schooler. I used to walk along the edges of the wall hoping nobody would notice me. But I really wish I would have been more willing to speak up when I was in high school, having the courage to disagree with people who I thought were wrong. Instead, I was trying so hard to belong and get accepted that I really wasn't myself. And if anything, I would tell myself is to speak up, have the courage to do it, be honest with yourself. If you can't be honest with yourself, you've got nothing going for you. It's a hard thing to do, and at that time, you're a young woman or you're a teenager and you just want so hard to belong, and you just don't know how to stand up for yourself. At least I didn't. But it is something that I did learn along the way, and it took a lot of noticing a lot of the sexism and the exclusion and the racism that was going on that made me speak up. But having the courage and taking that first step. By the way, once you take that first step, it's not that hard, and it isn't that impossible for you to do. So you keep building on it all the time and embraces the failure. You may not be successful right away, but you do need to speak up and be a part of what's going on and be true to yourself.
And I have a really specific thought in relation to that. Always ask your questions. If you're sitting there and you're thinking, gosh, I'd love to ask, whether it's here or in a classroom, and you say, well, but I might look stupid, or what if nobody else is interested? I want to assure you, and I used to tell this to my students many, many decades of teaching at a community college. I used to say, never be afraid to ask. There are no stupid questions. And if you have that question, I could almost guarantee you that when you have the courage to ask, a bunch of other people in the room are sitting there thinking, oh, thank goodness somebody asked. I wasn't ready to. So you're not going to ever be the only one. And even if you were, your question is valuable, and that's how we all learn. And again, even if it's intimidating sometimes, after you do it once, it will get easier and easier. And it's one way of knowing who you are and what your truth is ask your question.
So I have two, and the first is to listen to the basic things your doctor tells you to do. It's really important to build the habits now of eating vegetables, drinking lots of water, sleep as much as you can, because it becomes your lifestyle. And your lifestyle in that way builds the foundation for you to access anything mentally or social emotionally. So as silly as it sounds, building those habits at an early age will really cultivate success later on. And the second piece is to learn the power of a deep breath. I got so stressed out in high school and college, and I would just get really tense in my whole body. If you just take a minute to pause, even try it now. If you took a deep breath in and let it out, you can approach so many things better when your head is clear and your body is calm. So do what your doctor says and take deep breaths when you need them.
Well, I want to make sure that you guys aren't limiting yourself. Thank you all. We're now going to move into audience questions. So, I see you right there. You're going to go first. Make sure you say your name when you ask your question, and then I'll just call on people.
So hi, my name is Mia Kurowski. So my question is, how do you think your experiences in your jobs as being a mayor and an assemblywoman impact your perspective into your daily lives?
So the question was, how have your positions impacted your daily life? Who wants to start?
How their positions and what affected our daily lives.
Yes.
You know, for women in leadership positions, they're really a juggling act. Even though, you know, you can hire help as far as childcare and you can do these kinds of things, trying to get everything done is really very challenging.
Right there.
Hi, my name is Layla. I have a question for Tanya. So I am a student that attends a high school in South Central, and my question to you is, what has the LAUSD board been doing to help undocumented high school students, and what have you been doing to help underserved schools in my community?
So the question is, how has the LAUSD school board been working to support undocumented students, and how is the school board working to support underserved students, correct? Okay.
Thank you for the question, and I'll take the second part first. So before I became a board member, there were a bunch of community advocates that asked the district to fund our schools differently because the budget is a reflection of your values. And if you fund schools that have greater needs with more resources, they should be able to help meet some of the needs that kids have in areas like South LA that kids don't have, for example, in the Valley or the West Side. And so I was really proud to work along community partners to advocate for the district to change how we fund some part of our budget, not all of it, we have a long way to go. But I think when we say equity, some people misinterpret that and think that everyone needs the same, which is really like absolutely not the definition of equity, that's equality. And equal access and equal rights is an important value. But when we say equity, we actually mean you have to give everyone what they need. And what everyone needs is different. And when you have compounded issues of, you know, concerns around employment or immigration status or financial resources, the pandemic hit our communities differently. So I think we still have more to do around how we fund our schools and how we make sure that they can put the dollars to good use and are not just sitting with a bunch of teacher vacancies, which we know is happening right now across our district. But that's one way that we're going. I'll say we're not doing enough yet, particularly around undocumented students. I think there's a lot of work around getting students access to file the California DREAM Act application for college. There are some resource centers in different parts of the community, but so much of what I think schools could be doing more of is outreaching to families and helping to build that mutual trust, because schools should be hubs of the community. They should be places where you trust the adults, where you can share what's going on and you can get the resources that you need. And so often we know that our undocumented families in particular feel like they can't speak up. They feel like there's going to be a consequence if someone knows my status. And so what I think we should be doing more of is building those really solid, trusting relationships and making warm connections between all the different things we need. For example, mental health is not something we talk a lot about in the Latino community. In the Black community, sometimes it's like go to church, right? It's not like go see a therapist. And church is great, but we should also be thinking about all of the resources that could be accessible to students for whom resources are not as apparent or as available as they are in other parts of the neighborhood. And we should connect. If anybody else wants to connect after this, I got cards, happy to follow up with you too. Thanks.
Just add something that's very controversial, but I think it's really important. It's really not the school board's role. It's really the state and the feds. I really think they need to, with what we're seeing in our school population, is that parents that are sending these kids to school, many of them do not get to vote on their school board members. They don't get a say as what's going on. I think there should be, particularly for schools, and I'm not saying that not necessarily for city council or others, but particularly for our schools, we should challenge that and say that parents should be entitled to have a voice at their schools in some way, create some kind of a mechanism that they can be allowed to vote, at least for their school board members. So at least they have a voice like everyone else. Thank you.
I see you right there.
Okay, so this is for Tanya. So how does the board's education work to properly advocate for mental health within the school system?
Thank you. So the question for Tanya is, how does the school board properly advocate for students with mental health, with concerning mental health?
So I think about mental health as like a triangle. Think about the base of the triangle being the biggest part. We actually borrow this from public health. So about 80% of situations can be handled with proactive support, healthy relationships, learning how to manage stress, teaching social emotional skills. We do a lot of that in advisory with your teachers, but not enough. There's about 15% of that triangle, we're moving up, right, where there's more severe situations, maybe loss, grief, addiction, where group therapy or conversations would be helpful. That exists to some extent, but it's still not enough. And then of course there's the maybe 5% at the top. This is the biggest thing affecting LA Unified that is probably not yet talked about, but the number one incident report that I get on a daily basis over and over again across the district is suicidal ideation. And that, of course, only impacts a small number of students, but it is a life, a human life that we have to do so much more for. And so while I mentioned the hiring situation, we budgeted to hire about 900 social workers that would do some of that intensive clinical support. We have 500 vacancies. We do not have enough people to serve the children who need them. And so if anybody's interested in pursuing social work, nursing, teaching, these positions are crucial for our community to be raised, right? So the other thing I think we need to do is that pipeline work. How do we help high school students see coming back to be a social worker, a nurse, a teacher as a viable pathway, and one that is incentivized, where you're not going to be making a minimum wage, but you're going to be able to have a good life that you want to create for yourself. So we're doing some things, but we absolutely have to do a lot more. And like Ms. Molina said, in collaboration with other entities like the county, the city, the state, we should be doing a lot more together, because schools can do a lot, but we can't do it alone.
So let's go in. Ooh, last question. Ooh, I'm sorry. Okay, so we're gonna go in the black and white shirt towards the back.
Hi, my name is Emily Tamale, and my question for you is, what do y'all teach in
So most important characteristics for today's successful leaders. Who would like to start?
What's the most important characteristic?
The most important characteristics of a successful leader today.
I think it's integrity. I think that, be straightforward, being honest. One of the biggest destructions that's going on in our community is the lack of integrity with our local elected officials, with politicians, with these schools. Everyone is finding a way to get around the edges. And I really think it's very destructive to our society. So I think that one of the most significant and important, and sometimes you're going to see people get ahead that don't have that kind of integrity. And it's really tough to watch it. But I really do think at the end that if you step into a leadership role with that personal integrity and that responsibility, you're going to be so much more successful. But the most important part, you're going to be successful with yourself, which is really an important part of working every single day. So I see integrity as being one of the most significant characteristics to leadership.
I would like to add being willing to learn, always having an open mind, asking questions, getting information from different sources. Don't get caught up in one person's version, because you may be led down a path that is not real or not useful. Lots of willingness to learn, lots of seeking information, and listening to people a lot.
You took mine right at the end there. I was going to say a good listener. Good listener. But I agree with both the characters you guys just talked about, but I really want to echo listening. I think the primary job of an elected official is to listen to the community. And there's been so many times, I'm sure you guys have heard it, at least I have in my role, where somebody comes to the podium to give their public comment, and then one of the electeds says something after, and I'm like, were you listening? Right? Did you get the point that was being made here? But being able to hear the issues that are happening in the community, that's the best way to create policy going forward and to actually make a difference.
The benefit of going last. Integrity would have been my number one too. I wholeheartedly agree with listening and learning, but I'll just add, for the sake of living a holistic leadership life, joy. Finding joy in your job, finding joy in your family and your community, because this is hard work. And if you want to sustain the marathon, not just, collapse after a sprint, you got to find joy in the work.
Thank you all for your questions, and a huge thank you to our panelists, Tara, Tanya, Gloria, and Mona. Thank you all so much. I'm going to pass it off to Erica.
Thank you, Chloe. So we are just about wrapped up for the day. I can't believe we made it. Well, I think we've successfully initiated Women's History Month with a bang. So thank you all so much for joining us. I hope that this day has shifted your perspectives and inspired you. But beyond just today, think about stories like Maria Manjar's, who you heard earlier in the morning. Keep those stories with you. If you ever find yourself on campus at USC, know you have a home at the Center for the Political Future, so please don't ever be a stranger. As we wrap up, I want to just remind you all to take a look at some of our materials that we have for you. We want you to take action beyond just today and to really have something tangible to take with you. So as Mona mentioned, we have some resources from the League of Women Voters of Greater Los Angeles. Noelia Rodriguez, who joined us earlier this morning, has lots of swag from MetroLink that she brought, all for you. So please take anything. We have some little backpacks over there, some lanyards. So feel free and take, those are for you to take home with you. And last but not least, I want to share with you, and Ben, if you could help me get this on our screen, we also have QR codes that we're going to have over here. But we want you to kind of leave with something tangible, right? So we have certificates of participation for all of you. And so if you all just do the QR code thing. And just give us your information just so we make sure we spell your name correctly. It's also a brief survey. We want to hear from all of you. Let me get out of the way over here. We want to hear from all of you on what you liked, what you didn't like, and we hope that you all join us next year. So give yourselves a round of applause. And I want to bookend the end of our day with the way that we start. So if you all don't mind standing up again and humoring me, repeat after me. I am smart. I am smart. I am beautiful. I am beautiful. And I am powerful. Thank you so much for joining us.